Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the Mage Errant series, Book 2, Jewel of the Endless Erg, chapters 21, 22, 23, and 24. Unfortunate timing, bells, terrible plans all around, and let sleeping dragons lie. In these chapters, it turns out that there was a conspiracy to make it seem like a different sect existed and was invading the city. And really, it's just factions of the same sect. It's a pretty good move. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Dan for commissioning this episode. So I want to start out with, I don't want to call it an apology, but a bit of a disclaimer. I normally have the chance to read chapters twice, and I didn't get a chance this time. So I think, there's a possibility. I don't think I really missed anything major, but sometimes I'll catch something on a second read that I didn't really notice the first time, and that won't have happened this time. So sorry about that. But yeah, these chapters, this was a fun reveal. I feel like it was really well done, and it turns out that basically what it seems like it all comes down to is that somebody got two-timed, and they are getting really, really angry about it. And it looks like it's that petty and basic, but I'm sort of wondering if it might not be even more than this. We will get there, but I was genuinely kind of surprised at the base reason for all of the instigating incident that caused this domino effect. So, chapter 21, Unfortunate Timing. They had sent Ava out, and she is going to go and give the news about what they have discovered about this creature that they think the sect is worshipping to Bandon. I keep wanting to call him Brandon. It's very difficult. And I thought it was a really good idea to send her, and it's mentioned that she, out of all of them, is probably the least distinctive looking. So maybe she wouldn't be noticed. But I still felt like it was pretty risky. There was a part of me that was like, I wouldn't mind if she would turn around and go back to the boat or something like that instead of coming back here. I didn't even know how this was going to be set up. But yeah, I am assuming we hear a little bit later from, what's his face? I can't remember his name. I keep wanting to say Eudaxus, right? I keep wanting to say Eurydice. Brandon and Eurydice. Eudaxus is at the window, and he says that she didn't mention you, but you sent her with a page from Galvatron's bestiary. The page retained a magical link to the rest of the book, which my cult mages were able to trace back to you. That sucks. That is a really good idea. And yeah, sending her with the page itself, as much as it pains me, I can't think of a better idea, because I am going to guess they're not supplied with writing materials in this little, they are given the basic supplies to wait things out, and that is what they have. And they're not going to be able to make a exact copy of although they have magic, I don't know. But nevertheless, they didn't think of this. And there's a moment here where Talia says to Hugh that Ava sold us out. And I was just like, Talia, I'm going to need you to get a hold of yourself, because clearly you have some kind of beef about Ava and you're wanting to blame everything on her, and you need to get yourself under control, sister. You just need to manage that shit a little bit more effectively. So, I'm sorry guys if you can hear weird sounds. That's the puppy. I think he's snoring. So, I love this part because they keep trying to explain the actual situation to Eudaxus. They are giving him the information that they were trying to give Bandon, and he just doesn't buy it. And I really enjoy this. Sabe says, "My grandmother has a name for people who prefer to believe their own stories over reality." Is the name your grandmother has for them idiot? It's like you know her without having met her. My mother calls them the same thing, though with a lot more cursing. Honestly, there's quite a bit of cursing involved with my grandmother, too. Enough, children. Quit attempting to distract me and answer my questions. Which questions? What do you mean, which questions? I wasn't really paying attention on account of the dragon. Hugh desperately tried not to laugh as Eudaxus sputtered. He was absolutely terrified, and he was fairly sure his friends were too, but when Eudaxus had refused to listen to their pleas about Isendarin, instead repeatedly interrogating them about Alustin, they'd swiftly responded by acting like this. Hugh had mostly stayed quiet, but the others more than made up the difference. He sort of understood why they were doing it. It definitely made him feel a little more confident, and it clearly did the same for them. It was a brittle sort of confidence, though. And I really like this. You know, again, with the fact that, number one, adults are being brought in on the information. Y'all, like, I frequently bring up Harry Potter, but honestly, this is something that, there's a lot of YA and even like downright children's books that have the thing where kids feel the need to like not tell adults what's going on. And it's obviously done to keep the plot focused on the kids and make the like part of the plot circulate around making things secret from the parents, and that adding a wrench into everything, because a lot of stories, if anybody just told the parents what was going on, that would be the end of the story, you know? So I get why it's done, and sometimes it's believable. Sometimes the parents wouldn't believe them, or the parents would make certain assumptions that are untrue. But it can be really frustrating to read. And just the fact that they're like captured by this guy and they're like, fine. You know what? We're going to tell you the exact thing also. What do we have to lose? That's the right approach. And it's infuriating that this guy is not hearing them. And we find out a little bit later, it's so annoying. They wind up getting proven right, except that it was all a setup, so they're not actually right. It just seems like they were right in the short term because they jumped to the conclusion that Eudaxus was supposed to jump to. And I'm really curious because Eudaxus has been aware that there's like an issue with this other sect in the city, but he doesn't want to listen to them now and is convinced that like Alustin had something to do with it. So were they just going to go ahead and try and carry this out whether or not Eudaxus figured out anything on his own? I guess it was just going to be like, since it's part of his own sect that has broken off and is lying to him now, I guess they could basically lead him to water and get him there eventually, which is essentially what does have to happen here since he doesn't believe them. But it's just an interesting thing to consider how they were going to be. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I think about a lot, where if you are trying to trick a person into thinking something, if you're trying to give them clues to come to the wrong conclusion, and they are not very intelligent, or they aren't making the connections you wanted them to make, you eventually do just have to like bash them over the head with the conclusion you're trying to get them to come to more organically. And it reminds me of in A Storm of Swords, which I'm covering right now with Rashawn, we just got to this part where Sansa takes off on this ship, and it turns out that Peter Baelish is the one that was behind a lot of things. And Peter Baelish is explaining to her how he was forced to like explicitly tell Joffrey how to insult and infuriate Tyrion at the wedding, because what Joffrey wants is to just make his uncle angry and humiliate him. What Peter Baelish wants is to set Tyrion up as a believable patsy for murdering Joffrey. So he tries very subtly to manipulate Joffrey into hiring some little people to perform at the wedding and then try and involve Tyrion in the performance. But Joffrey isn't getting it. And finally, Peter just has to like say, this would be a thing to do that would really make him mad. And finally, the kid gets on board. But like, I love the concept of you're being a little bit too subtle, actually. And this guy isn't willing to see what's right in front of his face. So I guess you're just going to have to go ahead and pull the trigger on this plan, even though he hasn't really caught up yet. And the fact that he hasn't informed Bandon about the suspicions that he had and what's been going on. What I find really interesting about Eudaxus as a character is that he is like in charge of this group, but unwilling to actually have the sort of suspicious nature that you need to have to keep things under control. So he's like suspicious in certain directions, but it's all directed in the wrong way and the wrong people. And the suspicions are too late blooming. He needs to have begun to question things sooner and begun to begun to set more boundaries sooner. And because he doesn't do that, it all winds up manifesting in this very odd, backward way. So eventually, we get to the end of this sentence or chapter is they're pleased on behalf of Alustin, even their requests to talk to him were all summarily denied. And then we go to chapter 22, which started off with a sentence I really liked. Alustin was, despite all appearances to the contrary, extraordinarily upset about being in prison. He was rather good at contrary appearances. It wasn't that Alustin wasn't an eccentric, slightly excitable scholar with a love of both learning and sharing that learning. He most certainly was. But he'd found that exaggerating those aspects of his personality tended to be quite disarming. Even those who knew of his duties to candor and crux and what he was capable of often underestimated him when he began rambling on about forest husbandry in Sarnassus. And this is a really interesting concept to me, that he's just decided he's going to lean into this sort of like endearing part of his personality in order to throw people off their guard and make himself seem like less of a threat. And it makes sense. And honestly, it's really incredible how easy that is to do. Like, people are awfully quick to make judgments about what someone is like based on completely unrelated information. I have had a number of people think that I am less intelligent and rational because of the fact that I swear a lot and that I have like very passionate opinions. And they are taken aback when I can back up my arguments with reason, with facts, with articles, with anything. And I have seen that in action from people who otherwise like me even. It's not even just people who I'm sort of adversarial with. I have had people who are my friends clearly underestimate me and like expect sort of immaturity from me regarding certain things. And it's always interesting that I'm just like, so the fact that I'm funny and that I swear and that I can be very exaggerating about, just the way I'm feeling about things for effect, you just think that I don't have any sense of proportion or don't like understand the reality of the world. Like, why do you, what? And that's a real thing. So this makes sense that it wouldn't take that much for everybody to sort of stop paying attention to him as a threat. Like, clearly the guards are not really seeing him as a threat the way they should. They are tired of him. And Eudaxus is the only one that remains, it seems to me, like truly convinced. I don't know that the guards have an opinion one way or the other. But on top of this, the fact that he just rambles on about certain topics, it is not just to throw people off. It is also a mechanism to cover for the fact that he is using his far-seeing ability. It says, most people believed that far-seers had to close their eyes and focus silently to use the gift. And for most far-seers, that was true. It was too hard to sort out the competing images otherwise. For Alustin, however, it wasn't a problem. It was just a matter of multitasking. And that was his specialty. And I really enjoy the fact that we get his POV, but we don't see what he sees. We just see his reaction to what he sees. So there's a number of like areas of the tunnels and stuff that he like examines and thinks, oh, that's not good. Oh, that's even less good. I know that I've come across other people who sort of do the same thing that I do and review books and whatnot. And they have a real bone to pick with any time that you are in a certain character's POV and they do not reveal information that you think to yourself they would otherwise definitely reveal if you were in their head. To which I say, come on. It's the mechanism of writing from a POV doesn't mean that you just get a stream of consciousness of every single thing they're thinking. It is simply that you are seeing things from their perspective and seeing situations described from their perspective. But that does not mean that you're just getting every single thought. That's not how this kind of writing could possibly work. So it's fine for me that that's not how it happens. One of the weaknesses of far-seeing, at least the far-seeing attunement Alustin possessed, was its inability to carry anything but images. It was, in fact, a variant of the standard light attunement. There were mages with attunements that let them scry sounds over long distances, usually related to wind or sound, as his was to light, but they couldn't scry images. The mage who possessed both types of scrying attunement was far rarer and more valued than any battle mage. Alustin had considered attempting to develop the other type of scrying attunement, but he ultimately decided it was easier to learn to read lips. And that makes total sense to me. I think that, like, the hearing attunement might be, like, really nice and easy if you aren't able to use the sight attunement for whatever reason. Like, I'm curious, let's say, and this would almost never happen, but let's say that you're dealing with people who are, like, in a dark place. And maybe seeing them where they are and identifying who they are isn't going to be super helpful. Then hearing, maybe. But the thing is, if you've got this sort of scrying, you can just follow them back to wherever they come from and keep watching them. And then find out who they are, I suppose. So really, yeah, I don't fully understand how this works. I'm assuming that that's possible for him to do. But, anyway, he is starting to piece things together, and he's really enjoying the fact that his students have begun to figure things out. And it says, they've done remarkably well for themselves so far in a situation way over their heads. Not, unfortunately, as well as Alustin would have liked, but... And I was like, yo, dude, what do you mean not as well as you would have liked? Like, what is it that you would have liked? Because I feel like his expectations are a little bit unreasonable, and maybe you need to just, I don't know, man, share a little bit more information with them than you do if you want better results. I'm just saying. So, the guards were rather shocked when Alustin stopped lecturing them about the stages of a Sarnassian forest's growth cycle after a forest fire and started cursing like a dock worker. They were even more shocked when he pulled a saber covered in spell forms out of midair and hacked through the cage's lock in a single blow. You guys, when I tell you, I fell out at this part. I was just like, what? And so it's not exactly I'm in this prison because it's where I want to be. It's more, I'm in this prison because I may as well be. Not even like, it's not exactly to a purpose. It's just more like, well, I haven't figured things out and I need to do that before I decide my next move. So I'll just chill here, I guess. The paper wrapping and suffocate. Let's see. Oh yeah. When the sword vanished and thousands of pages of paper came flying so far as they could tell out of Alustin's right hand, it didn't seem likely that they could get that much more shocked, yet they accomplished it. The paper, wrapping and suffocating them into unconsciousness, still managed to surprise them the most somehow. And we find out later that he has a tattoo on his forearm, I think, that opens up an extra space. It's like a void key actually built into his body. Void key, that's a Cradle reference for those who are not aware. I'm acting like everybody who is following this has also read Cradle, and that's not fair. But yeah, the bag that he has that everybody thinks is this magical bag that can carry as much as he wants, like Mary Poppins, it turns out it's not the bag, and actually it is built into his body, which is honestly way better. I mean, come on. It's just way better. This is so much cooler. I can't imagine if Lyndon figured out that he could tattoo himself in a way that he had his void key on him permanently. Are you kidding? Like, first of all, absolutely he would do that. But second of all, you know that boy would be covered from head to toe in tattoos. He would be like 600 void keys if he could. Can you imagine? Oh my God. I just do not tell him about this. It would just go too far. Ooh, Dan's in the chat. I'm sorry, Dan. I didn't even see you there. I think it's literal. You are actually seeing another location with your eyes. Dungeons and Dragons bag of holding is the more standard reference. Dimensional pocket of storage. Right. I remember hearing about this bag of holding because there is a dice bag that's like named that. But yeah, D&D is not something that I'm like super familiar with. I played a little bit and I haven't been great at it and I didn't really love it. It's one of those things that I think you have to play with people who are like of a certain type, and I didn't really have those people playing with me. But I'm not against it. It's just, you know. So this is when he comes across his students and he just walks on in and takes them out, and they're all like, but wait, you're a paper mage? How can they're not battle mages? And again, Talia, you have been told many times to not just believe whatever you've been told about what limitations there are for certain people, and you're not listening, girl. But anyway, he says, Godric, Talia, I'm going to need the two of you to gain access to the main valves for the palace water pumps and make sure nobody does anything with them until further notice. In a little over an hour, dragon cultists are going to try and flood the lower reservoirs. They've already seized the valve controls, so you'll need to find a way to get past them. You need to stop them however you can. Sabe, I need you and Hugh to get to the Moonless Owl as fast as humanly possible. We've got maybe an hour and a half before the storm hits, and if we don't shield the city in time, it's going to wreck half of Theristel. I've already sent an origami golem to let Captain Solon know to be ready to sail the instant you get there. And this is quite a big deal, you guys. Like, I was just saying in the last section how impressive it was that Indris could shield this entire city. And now we've got poor Hugh out here being thrown into the fucking, out of the frying pan into the fire. He had to guard one ship. And that was it, which just seems so small now, from a sandstorm. And now Alustin is like, no. Now a city, a full city, like a giant city. Like there's 1 million people. People will die, like a lot of them, if you don't figure this out pronto. Honestly, fucking poor Hugh. I hate this for him. You know, like, I just really do. It's not fair. It's not fair. He says to use the same ward, and when Hugh is like, dude, we needed mana from everyone on the ship to power the ward. What do you think I'm going to do to power something this size? Alustin says that's where Sabe comes in. She's going to show you some Candace family secrets. And we don't find out what this is until a little bit later. When Hugh says, how do I draw a ward around an entire city? I don't have the chalk and I don't have the time. Candaron did tell you that your crystal affinity would be useful for wards, didn't she? And that in with your ability to imbue your will into... Okay, I'm misreading this. And that in with your ability to imbue your will into wards, and we're golden. Add that. Oh my God, you guys, I misread that like so many times. This is why I try to double read. Add that in with your ability. Fucking Christ. Jesus. I'm so tired. But what I think he's saying is to use the sand to make the spell form, well, the ward. Spell form's a different thing. But to draw the physical ward with the sand. Which, that's dope. And I'm really interested to see how he does it. The map is pointing out quite a lot of defenses on the way to the valve controls. I'm sure you'll find out some clever way to completely circumvent them that doesn't involve excessive violence and explosions. So, we know, like, that there's been this suspicion this whole time, especially coming from Sabe, that Alustin was sent here on a mission, right? And so far, the mission has been thought to be something maybe physical in nature, like he is getting a book of some type. I don't know. I'm sort of wondering if there wasn't an awareness something like this was going to happen, and that these kids, and specifically what they can do, were going to come in handy for the emergency that the entire city was going to be facing. Because how many, like, ward-specific mages are there that are as gifted as Hugh? And, you know, the fact that there's a Candace family member here with their family's secret on how to fuel this thing almost perpetually. Like, it's just, it feels like too much of a coincidence. And this writer doesn't seem to like dealing in coincidence. He feels like he likes things to have been planned by somebody. So I'm feeling like this is all coming together. So he's giving them more orders, and Sabe just tells him, no, we're not doing anything until you explain what's going on. And when she continues to refuse after he's pushing, he says, I need you to trust me until we pull this off, and then I'll explain. Do you think I'd lie to you? Yes, Sabe said. Yep, Talia said. Definitely, Godric said. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time, Hugh said. Alustin looked vaguely offended for a moment, but then he seemed to consider for a moment and shrugged. Do you guys notice this? Alustin looked vaguely offended for a moment, but then he seemed to consider for a moment and shrugged. It's happening. This is not the first one of the book. I just hadn't run across one specifically in what I was reading to y'all, but this writer needs more beta readers. I don't know how this gets past him and whoever is doing his editing, but it happens so often. He just has certain words that he really likes to use and certain phrases that he really likes to use, and he does not catch himself using them repeatedly. And like this, they can be repeated within the same sentence, and it's not a long sentence. Alustin looked vaguely offended for a moment, comma. 6 words, including A. But then he seemed to consider for a moment and shrugged. Like, sir, does he do the out loud reading thing? Because I feel like you would have to notice. And it comes across especially in the audiobook because of the fact that the narrator for the audiobook has an irritating quirk where he read sentences with a very similar cadence over and over, no matter what happens in those sentences. So you hear that rhythm even more exaggerated. But anyway, I just wanted to mention it because I find it so personally distracting, and it's something that I know I do as well, but I also catch it because I'm aware that I have these things, these like almost sort of writing tics. And so I look for them, and I just want him to be more aware of the fact that he does this. Dan says, I think the first few books were self-edited. He took a bit of a break between books 3 and 4, and the editing gets better. Okay, cool. So he says, all right, quick version. Ataerg, I hope I'm saying this right because I do not remember how he says it in the narration, is leading his half of his and Indras's brood in an attack on the city, and they've raised and harnessed a sandstorm to do so. A lot of Indras's brood has abandoned her to join him as well, which is rough. There was never a second cult. It was a rift. They were the ones who poisoned Indras and stole her egg, and they're the ones who falsely reported Isendarin so that they could lure them down and release the reservoirs and drown them all, which I was like, damn. I've already sent origami golem letters alerting Eudaxus and other influential members, but we can't count on them believing me. Everything past the bit with the reservoir and the fact that Ataerg and his half of the dragon brood are attacking the city and bringing a sandstorm behind them is pure speculation. So this is, again, sort of making me wonder about the sandstorm earlier because I had theorized that maybe it was a setup. But then the fact that the egg was stolen feels like it's not even part of the same plan. So this really what I want to know now, there was a moment during which a dragon came and left this like long info dump for Alustin. And I am assuming what was in that letter probably had to do with the fact that either Indras or that dragon had become aware of the fact that something was going down. And I am really curious exactly what Alustin was supposed to do or why they told him, because he wound up getting arrested, but it doesn't seem like that was not intentional. You know, we know that he was upset about it and he just used his time as best he could to like gather some information about what was going on. So is there anything else that potentially could have been done or that he was expected to do? And did he? And we just haven't seen it yet. I don't know. And Alustin says they delayed until you were in custody. They were worried you'd interfere with the storm. The instant you were captured, they kicked off their plans. And Godric is like, oh, so they're just trying to destroy the city. They're not even trying to take it over. It explains how they framed you for the theft of the egg, Sabe said. The traitor cultists didn't even need to find an illusionist that could copy you. They could just lie and say they'd seen you. But if they hadn't tried to steal it, Indras would already be dead. It seems like a flaw in their plan. And this is when Alustin is like, yeah, see, I am still not really getting what the deal is with the egg. But we have got to get a move on with everything else that's happening before we figure that out. Where are you going? I'm going to slay a dragon. He does know that dragons breathe fire, right? And that paper doesn't do so well against fire? And I am like, what makes you think that paper is the only thing he's got to fight with? But also, I don't know that paper isn't going to be good against fire because this is magic we're dealing with. I don't know how much the natural issues with whatever material you're attuned with even come into play. So we know that he's got other attunements though. That's the main thing for me. So he was talking to Sabe how do we get down to the Moonless Owl in time? I've got a plan. Is it a good plan? It's actually something of a terrible plan. I don't suppose there's a backup that's better. The backup plan is to catch a dragon and try to ride it. Ah, no. I think I like the first plan. What's the first plan? Well, you know how all streets in Theristel tend to be twisty and windy and full of switchbacks? There's one route that's more direct. What is that? Sabe just pointed upwards. For a moment, Hugh had no idea what she was talking about until he realized what she was pointing at. The aqueducts. The dragon's already sounding better and better, Hugh said. You guys know that I'm into this. I mean, basically, what we've got going on here is a combination of Water 7 from One Piece and is it the Earth Kingdom in Avatar Last Airbender that's got all of those like chutes and that's how they transport things around the city? I just can't be mad at this. So then we go to Godric and Talia, and he's like, so what's the plan? Because, like, we can't just go straight through. And she gets this look, and he's like, you were just going to go straight through. Well, yes. But we're not going straight through defenses. We're going through the floor. There's too much rock in the way. There's no way I can get through that much in time. At this point, your stone affinity is nearly fully attuned, and we won't just be using your stone affinity. What do you... Talia manifested a bolt of dream fire and sent it hurtling into the floor. A chunk of it, the size of his head, dissolved into bubbles that floated up into the air before popping. That still won't be enough to make us a hole big enough to get down in time. It doesn't need to be big enough for us to get down there. She pulled several shards of bone from her pocket. Oh, said Godric. Lovely. So then we go to Hammett the Diceless. An extraordinarily unlucky man. He lost every game of chance he played. He got assigned all the worst shifts. He'd fallen into Theristel's sewers on no less than 3 occasions, and now he'd been assigned to stay and guard the palace during the first real battle Theristel had ever seen in his lifetime. And now the Skyhold battle mage accused of stealing the queen's egg had burst out of a door right into the courtyard Hammett was stealing a quick smoke break in. Oh, Hammett, I'm so sorry, bud. There are just people like this in the world. And this battle mage comes out, and he is like, hey man, you really shouldn't be smoking. It's not good for you. It's awful for your health. He's ready to fight. He's ready to do it. But these like flapping pages don't come near him. It swarmed around the battle mage, plastering all over his back, and began to form a sort of structure. From the shapes were wings. Have a nice day and seriously think about quitting smoking. And he just flies upward. He sees something else. A teenage girl carrying a terrified-looking teenage boy through the air in a massive 30-foot leap, with her legs surrounded by what looked like miniature cyclones. The girl slammed feet first into a wall, and the cyclone seemed to explode off her legs, sending the two vaulting even higher. She landed on a nearby roof, then launched upward once again, coming down for a landing atop a nearby aqueduct, where the two vanished out of sight. Hammett's pipe fell out of his mouth and broke on the courtyard floor. Ah, Hammett. Ah, buddy, he needs a drink. He needs to go, have a drink, and go to bed early tonight. So Alustin, for his part, is looking around at like the damage that Indris has already caused and is thinking about how if she had just taken the time to go out the regular exit instead of flying through the roof, people wouldn't have died. And let's see. In fairness, it seemed... Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. Alustin darted around a tight intersection only to find a Kandarin-sized dragon directly in front of him. In fairness, it seemed much more surprised to see him than the other way around. It was definitely surprised when he flew between its legs rather than over it, just barely missing hitting its tail on the way past. It wasn't, sadly, surprised enough not to chase him. And I was like, yeah, that is a bummer. Just let him go. Just, you don't know who he is. Maybe they do know who he is. I don't know how distinctly they are aware of him as a threat personally, or not even as a threat, but they need him to take the fall. Although at this point, do they? And if they hadn't set up the dragon's egg steal, maybe it has nothing to do with them. I don't know. So they use the aqueduct, and they are shooting down it like it's a water slide. And this is just a momentary aside from me. Those of you who are heavier now than you used to be the last time you got on a water slide, please be forewarned. That experience is going to be significantly different now. Just for your information, as somebody who had gained a lot of weight since the last time I had ever gone to a water park, I went with Owen, and it was truly terrifying how I accelerate now because of my weight. That shit was out of control, and I would come out of the bottom of these slides like a bullet. And one time wound up basically topless for a second because my strap on my bathing suit broke because I flipped over and hit the bottom going at a high speed. It was not good. So just saying, I just have to mention that here. So she's using this to the gust strikes to steer them. Two lefts next in rapid succession. He was already starting to shiver. This water was cold, and he is starting to get sick and be like, man, I really feel for Talia and her seasickness now. So remember the spot where one channel of the aqueduct went over the other? There's a drain right underneath it. Hold on tight. Oh God, you guys. A massive force seemed to accelerate them upward, and they launched out of the water. Hugh could, to his horror, see straight down the drain as they passed over it before they crashed down into the current on the other side. As they came back up, it was 10 seconds before Hugh could see or talk again. Did we go down the right channel? I'm pretty sure we did. Pretty sure? Pretty sure. Maybe we should get out and check. We don't have a lot of time. If we did it correctly, we should have just one more left, and then we're there. I really, really hope you're right. Me too. And they hold on and tip over the edge. Sabe blasted them out of the water and into the air above the harbor. They immediately began plummeting. No. Absolutely not. No. Nope. Just fucking no. No, thank you. Pass. Oh my gosh. This just, oh my God, so agitating. No, I just... Anyway, okay. So, Godric, I'm going to narrow the spell more. He was using a fairly simple stone-breaking spell focused in a narrow column. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was effective. Godric wasn't happy about the enhanced sense of smell his scent affinity gave him. The stone the Dreamfire destroyed tended to give off a truly awful stench. And that I found really interesting, why that is. He smells something else, but he's... I doubt I will be happy we're drilling a hole in the floor. You could have waited 2 minutes longer. There was a dragon that comes around the corner, a relatively small one, only about 30-something feet long. Relatively left a lot of room for getting bit in half. Talia manifested a rapid sequence of Dreamfire bolts at the dragon almost before it could react to them. So she's hitting the dragon, and they don't work. And the dragon is like, babe, you know I'm a fucking dragon, right? Fire is not the weapon to use against me. That ain't gonna work. Would you like to see what true fire looks like, little mages? The dragon abruptly stopped inhaling and started trembling as Talia tosses something into the borehole. This is a really interesting thing. We find out that dragons make a what it seems like is they make a flammable mucus and then using magic, I guess, ignite it as it comes out of their mouths. And that mucus acts a lot like napalm. So if it gets stuck to you, it does not come off. And a lot of times people will literally sever an arm just to get it off of their body because otherwise they would die. They would be consumed by it. And don't know how many people are interested, but another series that I have been covering, the Dandelion Dynasty series by Ken Liu, there are creatures named Garinifin that breathe fire. And the mechanic for those is that they have like that sort of methane from their stomach's digestion that happens with like cows as well, where they have multiple stomachs and, you know, different things happen in different stomachs. And there are mechanisms in their mouth that when they connect create a spark like flint. So they close their mouths to spark and then open and breathe out the methane from their gut that has become ignited from the flint catch in their mouth. I just always find it really interesting whenever writers decide that there needs to be an explanation for why dragons can breathe fire and how differently they come up with their methods and the reasons that they work. So I just thought it was fun. But yeah, so she tosses this thing into its mouth and then it vomits. Oh no, I'm sorry. I thought she tossed it. He saw Talia toss something into the borehole, but he tossed Godric a stink bomb in its face, and she dropped bone shards down the hole. I'm charging them as we speak. I hate this so much, though. The dragon is asking, "What did you do to me?" And the dragon vomited. That's how bad the stench was. She has created that thing where the bone grows and begins to glow and explode. The dragon had slowed down and was eyeing the bone spire curiously. The shockwave sent them tumbling. Godric felt like someone had punched every one of his organs at once, and then he slammed into the ground, Talia on top of him. It didn't hurt even a fraction as bad as last time. This poor dragon. Honestly, I felt like, so, you know, initially I saw it as an enemy immediately, the way she did. But then Godric says, "Do you think it would have attacked us if you hadn't attacked it first?" I might, Talia admitted, have been a bit too aggressive. And I think Indris might be less than pleased when she finds out we killed one of her kids, Godric said. "You're probably right about that," Talia said. The floor gave out beneath them. That had not occurred to me, and I felt really sad about it after. This just bummed me out. Like, cool fight. Glad you guys are figuring things out with your abilities and ways to use them, and it's creative and all that, but like, oh, ouch. So then we have the last chapter, Let Sleeping Dragons Lie. It took several minutes to shake off the dragon's pursuit. Ironically, it had been the dragon taking to the air that had let him get away, as Alustin had immediately darted beneath an aqueduct to get out of sight once it was in the air, and then stopped and let the dragon fly ahead. So he goes and he sees Indris, who is still breathing, but not doing super well. And I will tell you what, guys, genuinely starting to wonder if Indris is actually poisoned. Like, I feel like Indris seems pretty smart, and I wouldn't be hugely shocked if she were pretending to be in more distress than she is in order to lure people in, thinking that they've got her and they just need to finish her off so that she can then finish them off. Because she just seems savvy to me. And I just don't buy it. There's something about this that feels a little bit too vulnerable and exposed. And I'm just like, I don't know. We'll see, though. So, Indris looked worse for wear. The flesh between her scales and the membranes of her wings was a sickly shade, and her chest rose and fell slowly and irregularly. She had several scabbed-over wounds from the fall that Alustin could see, and he suspected she had more he couldn't see. And he lands and he calls to Eudaxus, who cracks his neck as he comes towards, or Alustin cracks his neck as Eudaxus come towards him. And I'm like, sir, I don't need you. Like, your whole thing here is we don't have to fight. We're on the same side. But, like, you're cracking your neck in a way that just feels like what you do right before you're about to start a fight. I just feel like maybe don't have this energy when you're approaching this man. That's all I'm saying. And Eudaxus, like, does not believe him. Alustin says, do you think I'm faking the sandstorm? And he's like, no, I think you're using the sandstorm that's here by accident to your advantage. And I don't know why. And he's also talking about Candaron, and he's like, if she wants to grab for power, poisoning Indris makes sense, but then why steal an egg? Why would Candaron want it? And Alustin is trying to be like, yeah, of course she doesn't want it, because that's not what's happening. Unless she didn't order you to steal it. Perhaps you're doing it of your own accord. Perhaps it's part of your little vendetta against Haveth. No idea what that means, but it definitely means something to Alustin, who scowls without intending to, which means that this is a particular sore spot for him because he lost control of his expression for a second. So then Alustin says, so, don't you think it's weird that this is the only egg she has ever laid that she kept secret and didn't celebrate? And Eudaxus does the whole, well, she can do what she wants, she's the queen. But Alustin's like, sir, one, you know that's weird. And two, she only laid one egg, which is weird because normally she lays a bunch. Dragging egg clutches are supposed to be quite a bit larger when both parents are the same breed, as Indris and Ataerg are. When they're different breeds, well, single egg clutches are quite common. And Eudaxus is like, I know what you're suggesting. And that's absolutely fucking not what happened, because they are loyal to each other. And as a cult that follows her, a major tenet of ours is the fact that they are loyal to each other. And that's why she is so different and impressive, is because of the fact that she is loyal. And Alustin is like, yeah, what do you think about the people who believe what I'm saying, though? Like, if Ataerg thinks she cheated, do you think there wouldn't be people who would take his side and maybe splinter off? And Eudaxus does a whole, I would have known if they were breaking away and I could have stopped it. To which Alustin says, you couldn't even stop your own underlings from burning down the invisible cult. They don't worship you. They worship Indris, and for many of them, Ataerg as well. And for her to betray him, to betray parts of what sets her apart from other dragons? And Eudaxus is just straight up saying, I cannot believe that so many would break the faith, and in such a manner, and I cannot believe that Ataerg would turn against Indris. So he's not even trying to pretend this is out of the question. He's not trying to pretend that the scenario being laid out doesn't make sense. He is simply saying, I refuse to believe. That's it. That's what it comes down to. The logic is all on Alustin's side, but Eudaxus simply refuses to believe him, despite all the evidence in his face right now. And this is one of those things that I find deeply frustrating, but also is what reality is like. Because you could show people the facts in front of their fucking face in a million different, on television, in a book, on a podcast, told to them by professionals in the field. Does not matter if they don't want to believe you. They just will not. They just don't. And it's the worst. Like, I personally don't really understand that kind of personality, because I am somebody who definitely changes up my opinion when I get new information. I mean, very, very easily. When you present me information that feels valid, that's opposing what feels valid being the key, I will stop and reevaluate. That doesn't mean I will necessarily entirely buy what you're selling, but it may temper my opinion. That's just how I work. And the idea of being presented with this like extremely plausible scenario, and all that is required for this scenario to be true is that people have a different set of values from you, then yes, that does seem like a real thing, Eudaxus. Like, come on, man. And he says, our contingency plan will be adequate. Your contingency plan? Indris's combined loyal brood won't be enough to protect even half of Theristel for the duration of the storm, and that's without Ataerg attacking. I know how to protect the city. It can be done if you listen to me. And Eudaxus straight up looks at him and is like, no, you're trying to trick me, and I'm not going to fall for it. And I was like, my God, man, I don't know. Like, you're being given all of these, and I get that he thinks this is a trick and it's coming from an unreliable source. But sir, if you recontextualize the things that have happened over the past few days mentally, it will begin to fall together for you too. And everything you're saying about Alustin and what he's doing, you keep repeating, I don't know why you would do that, about a lot of different aspects of it, which maybe you don't know why, because it doesn't make any fucking sense what you're saying. Like, come on. So anyway, then we go back to Hugh. And he is yelling how much he hates this. And Sabe is like, you agreed to this. And he's like, God damn it, I did. So they drop onto the deck of the Moonless Owl. And Captain Solon says that might be the second craziest way to board a ship I've ever seen. And when Sabe's like, second craziest, he does not respond. He doesn't get a chance. And I'm like, that's the story. We're gonna find out about that. Does kissing your daughter in front of you raise it to the craziest way? Sabe asked, most unhelpfully in Hugh's opinion. I really am excited the fact that they are kissing over and over again, you guys. I thought it was going to be like a one thing and then they might be weird about it. But no, they're kissing all the time. And I'm here for it, just straight up. Your teacher still has you beat with the whole Gorgon incident, which is the thing earlier that Indris had mentioned to him. And I'm like, I really want to know. I'm assuming he got carried there, right? But I don't know. I got a letter from Alustin saying you need our help to save the city. And then we go back to Godric and Talia. And they manage to Godric keeps them from falling by pumping mana into a dagger. Let's see. They fell a couple feet before Godric pumped mana into the dagger, which came to an immediate halt in midair. They hung in midair as the hallway floor collapsed down into the valve room below them. It was enough of a drop that Godric doubted they would have survived. Massive pipes rose up from the floor up into the ceiling. And the corpse gets dropped of the dragon. I really feel bad about this little guy. Hold on tight. He quit channeling mana into the dagger and they fell again. Just a few feet. Godric channeled mana back into it. They came to a halt with a jerk. And finally, they touched down. But they've had to do that fall quick stop over and over again until his poor shoulder is dislocated, basically. So I think we're standing on the control platform. There we go then. Mission accomplished. Godric clambered off the pile of rubble and strode over to the massive steel doors leading out of the valve room. And he can hear people behind them. And he's like, yeah, I don't think mission accomplished quite yet. I think there's going to be another part of this. So then we have Hugh going through his cabin. He gets Sabe's grandmother's journal, and he is looking at the ward and whatnot, and figuring out, like, just how big this thing has to be, how there can't be any errors in it for the entire thing. And finally he says, I don't know how to power this, to Sabe. And she comes over and she takes his quill and she sketches out this spell form. And he's looking at it and he's like, wait a second. What's happening here? This isn't drawing energy out of mages. It's one of my family's closest kept secrets. We call it the Windload spell form. A lot of storm mages have something similar, but none of them possess anything nearly as efficient as the Windload. The dense ether during storms can make... the Windload is designed to tap into that type of density to produce... to power spells. I can't use it safely thanks to my difficulties, but you should be able to fit that into your ward. And he's looking at this and he's just like, God damn, this is a really big deal that she's telling me this. And it's no wonder her family is so powerful, because nobody else has been able to figure this out either, from what I can tell. And it's just going to need to be like, the way he describes this as, it would only gather power when an actual storm approached, meaning the ward would turn itself on and off with the storms. At least it would if he were building something more permanent than what he was planning. Which is honestly dope as hell. The fact that it's not even something that you need to power. It can just turn it, like, I am very interested in this. And Sabe says, okay, dude, I'm giving you this because we really need it. And this is an emergency situation. And like, millions of lives depend on this. But you cannot let anybody else see it. Memorize it right the fuck now, because then I am going to tear it up, because nobody else is going to be able to be trusted with it. They could wreak havoc on the weather. They don't understand, like, and also I could get in serious fucking trouble from my people. And we cut away again. There's a lot. We're just jumping around from POV to POV. So then we go to Alustin and Eudaxus. And basically, the two of them begin attacking each other. And this, like, attack that comes from Eudaxus is real creepy. So first there's a dragon that's shooting flame at him. And we get the description of how dragons breathe flame. And then the shadow, like, he comes out of a shadow by Alustin. Let's see, I'm trying to find the spot. None of it hit him, but all of it was promptly sucked up by the windshield, where it began to break apart into burning clumps being swept around and around the impact site. Eudaxus, I don't want to fight. I'm trying to help right now. What do you think Ataeg is going to do when he gets here? He already ordered Indra's poisoning. Do you think he's here to apologize? I have only your word he's even coming. What do I have to gain from lying about this? And Eudaxus is just saying to finish the job you started. And I'm like, dude, he could bail. He could have left the city and come back and you wouldn't have noticed. Like, this all is a result of him coming to find you, to warn you, which he did not have to do. And Alustin even says, like, if Kandarin wanted Indris dead, she would have attacked directly. Like, this isn't how she operates. You know what she's like. This doesn't make any sense. And don't you think it's weird that all of the eyewitnesses who saw me in the castle at the given time are people from your cult? There were no servants, and there were no guards, and there were no dragons who also report it. It was only cultists. That doesn't sway you at all. And yeah, I'm sorry, Alustin, came Eudax's voice out of Alustin's own shadow. I am too, Alustin said, in a normal tone of voice, as he pumped mana into the glyphs on the hundreds of pages he'd been scattering around the impact site. Light glyphs. Alustin felt the bonds around him disappear along with his shadow, and he heard screams from men and dragons alike as the light blinded them in the seconds Alustin left it on before he stopped pumping mana into the glyphs. A dragon nearby staggered, crashing into a half-ruined building. As it collapsed, Alustin noticed something important. The dragons had stopped maintaining the windshield. Alustin could escape. Or at least he might have been able to, if the collapsing windshield weren't dumping a rain of burning dragon fire. Which, yeah, that does suck. That does suck. So I'm over time and I really do have to wrap, but I'm very excited to see what happens in the next chapters. The next episode is going to be the last one for Jewel of the Endless Urg, and then we are going to start Traitor and Skyhold. So we're really quickly moving through these books. But yeah, the shadow magic thing, I'm always like, this is something that was also in, oh my God, I keep wanting to say Avatar. You guys know what I'm talking about with Al and Ed. Help, but there's a shadow magic thing happening in that as well, and I found it to be very, very cool, and really creepy, and just, you know, really well done, and that's what I kept imagining here as well. So Full Metal Alchemist, oh my God. I got it just before Eduardo posted. Thank you, Eduardo, for that. But yes, that was exactly what I was thinking. I was just like, God damn it. But Pride has shadow powers, and it is very, very creepy. So, all right. Thank you all again so much for hanging out with me. Appreciate y'all a lot. Thank you, Dan, for commissioning this. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.